Hello and thanks for checking out TheChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide working together to learn the charts, generate profit, and achieve financial independence. For access to daily live chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chat community, along with dozens of hours of exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Let's check out some charts. Hello, MJ Sector friends. We're going to check in on some Canadian names and some US names catching our attention just this past Monday as we head into the new year. So when I'm keeping my tabs on the market every day, I have the 5 major Canadian MJ names up on my desktop on my platform. And I have a few US MJ names up there as well, KSHB, MedMen, IAN, and I keep an eye on them because I always want to know how the two sectors, the same sector but different locations, are comparing with each other. And Monday was another day where it was very clear that the US sector was outperforming the Canadian MJ names. So to confirm that, I go to marijuanaindex.com and I group it here as to who was the biggest winners, and you can see it's dominated by US names. So that stands out to me. Obviously, one day doesn't make a trend or a pattern, but this needs to spark our attention and have us looking for that pattern, because if this is something that we consistently see, it's certainly something that we want to pay attention to going forward. As we know, the overall market in the S&P 500 is going to continue having an impact on these sectors, but ideal scenario for me is, having the market cool things off and then try and recover into some federal changes in the US with laws. That's the most bang for our buck that we're going to get with the USMJ sector exploding sometime in the next few years. So this consolidation going on in the S&P 500 could be a good thing. And as long as the timing is right, again, for Canadian MJ, the timing could not have been more perfect with the market at all-time highs, leading into the first day of sales. That was just the ideal perfect scenario. So ideally, we get some kind of perfect scenario for the USMJ sector as well, as we patiently wait, and certainly sitting on a pile of capital waiting for the USMJ market, and who knows how long that wait's going to be, but paying close attention, especially on days like Monday. So for the major Canadian MJ names, it's the same story that we've been seeing the last 4 days. It is still a bear flag, and it's still up to the bulls to prove themselves to us in order for it not to be a bear flag. What makes a bounce a bear flag is the size of the bounce. If we see a significant bounce creating space for the bulls to pull back and form a higher low, let's just look at SPY and compare what I'm talking about here. So SPY on the daily time frame, the bounce at this point is significant enough that we can be looking for a higher low to form on a pullback. We have a lot of space to work with. We went from essentially 233 all the way up to 251. That's a very significant bounce from the low to the high, so a higher low is most likely to form. That's why it's not a bear flag. Solid movement up. When you look at CGC and some of these other names, the bounce is nowhere near as significant, and the percentage drop that we would need to see lower lows is a lot less. We need about a 4% drop from here in order to drop down and break to lower lows. So again, at this point, it is a bear flag, and we would need a clear, solid day up. Every single day here that we get a higher high, there's very little follow through, whereas on SPY, that follow through from one day to the next was very significant. So the key support remains the hourly uptrend, which the bulls need to maintain. So 2650 is a key level, and you can see we barely held that double bottom on Monday. If we break 2650 on Wednesday, the odds that this is a daily bear flag are going to increase, and we're going to be looking down at 2526 as a key support level. If we break down and break 2526, we need to zoom out to try and find the next support level on the weekly time frame, and it's going to be down at 2421. So key level that the bulls need to maintain, and at this point, a lot of people talking about tax loss selling being done. It's definitely something to be aware of, but I will never, ever make a decision on that information alone. It has to be seen on the charts because price action is king. And, we can say that the selling is going to be done all we want, but right now the bulls aren't proving that to me on the chart. So stick to the charts and block out all that other noise. And if the tax loss selling is done, we'll see it on the chart. And that's not the case right now for me. So APHA had some pullback, looking like that hype of the hostile takeover is fading a bit, and looking like some people are poking some holes into, the details behind it. But key support is down at 531 and then down to 455. We still have the daily little higher low and higher high, so the bulls really want to maintain 531 or that support is going to be lost. We closed near the low of the day with momentum favoring the bears, 560, and then 531 are our two supports. Resistance is 588 and then 610 as the two resistance levels to be watching. And just back to CGC, the key resistance that the bulls are going to have to break on Wednesday, 2707 and then 2806. So we need a 5% move to see continuation on the daily and a 5% bear move to see a new low. So we're right near the middle of that range. ACB is also a bear flag on the daily until the bulls prove otherwise, if they can prove otherwise. Close near the low of the day as well. So the hourly uptrend is important here. And we actually did lose it on Friday with a little lower high and lower low. There's a base of support at 674 and 668. So if we break 668, the odds of the daily bear flag will increase fairly significantly, and we'll be looking down at that 623 recent low. We do have more support or I should say we have more range to work with, where we've got about 8 or 9% where we drop before we drop to a lower low, whereas CGC only has 4 or 5%. So a little bit more space to work with, but again, not even seeing 2 green days in a row. And we've seen 2 green days in a row one time in the last month plus 5 weeks. So again, we're not seeing any kind of bullish momentum and follow through in the sector just yet, though we're certainly keeping an eye out for it. But the close of the low of the day is not going to give the bulls much momentum. Cron on the daily time frame, also a weak bounce attempt, also the hourly uptrend. Key to be watching. We had a little lower high and just held support of 1026 and 1025. So pretty much a triple bottom on Monday. If we break 1025, the odds of the daily bear flag will increase, and we'll be looking down at support of 956. And again, we have about 8-9% to work with before we drop to that support level, a bit more than CGC. So it's possible that we would see CGC break to a lower low first, if that's how it's going to play out, and then Cron and ACB perhaps would follow shortly after. But at this point, it's still all about the hourly uptrend, and that's what we're watching on SPY as well. When SPY loses the hourly uptrend, it's going to be the indication that the top of the bounce is in for now, and then we'll pull back and look for that higher low. TLRY is an equilibrium on the daily, so nice tight range. We have our low, high, higher low, and lower high. Another name that closed down at the low of the day with bear momentum on Monday. 67.66 is the key support. If that breaks, 64.06 is next. As far as resistance goes, 77.27 and 82.39. So got the low, high of the bounce, higher low, lower high, real tight range, likely to break on Wednesday, and if not on Wednesday, certainly on Thursday, I would say. So that's one to be watching. Now we're going to get into some U.S. names. So I'm still keeping my eye on KSHB. It's had a very significant bounce at this point. We went from 440 essentially to 540. So a nice 20+% bounce over the last 4 days. The U.S. names are really showing me their liquidity, which is poor at this point. But that's ideal when we get euphoria and hype. So if we have thinly traded stocks with a lack of liquidity, when hype and euphoria hit, they run very significantly. That's when market cap and valuations go out the window. We saw it happen with the Canadian MJ space. Market caps don't matter when hype and emotion take over. So in the US MJ space, I expect that if we do see capital coming in and a surge, right now the space, we're seeing people slowly come in. There's no influx all at once. And back when I started trading these USMJ stocks, there were only 8 of them in 2010. And that was a funnel effect of money. So if money was coming in, it was only choosing these 8 names. Now it's a much broader, choosing that you have of these stocks. So we don't have that same funnel effect. But the funnel effect at this point is from, major news in politics or law changes, or major hype in the media coverage. So those are things that lead to an influx all at once, and that's what drives the prices up significantly. That's when the bids and demand far outweigh the asks and supply on a ticker, and that's when we get crazy valuations, 100% plus runs, and that's something we're watching for in this space. And on a name like KSHB, when I'm looking at 10,000 share orders, it moves the price pretty good in these last couple weeks. So if we see big money start to come in, that's when we get significant bull moves because it's thinly traded and because liquidity is lower. So again, that's something we're keeping an eye on as well. Always watching volume. But at this point, we're scouting a daily lower high, just like SPY on this bounce. But the bounce is significant enough that an equilibrium is by far the most likely scenario, where we have our resistance double top at $6, our low of the pullback. We're going to look for a lower high to form somewhere in the mid $5 range, and then a pullback. And ideally, the bulls are going to try and form a higher low in the upper $4 range. But an equilibrium is the most likely scenario. And if you overlay this with the S&P 500, you'll see how very similar these two charts are right now. and they are pretty much exact. So very clear that KSHB is very correlated to the S&P 500 at this point. IAN, also keeping an eye on this name, the weekly time frame is trying to change the trend, and we have an equilibrium forming on the weekly. So again, I love the tightening ranges and the breaks of those tightening ranges. We have the low of 450, the high of the bounce is 648, a higher low at 475, and now we're looking for a lower high compared to 648, and we could probably tighten up here for another 2-3 weeks. So again, there's no rush, but this is the tightening pattern to be watching, and if we see an equilibrium and then bull break, that's the weekly trend change heading back into the $7 range that we're going to be looking for. So I want to be patient here and wait for the tightening ranges to break, but that's certainly something to be watching. And there's other names that are forming similar tightening weekly ranges as well. And the higher lows, you're going to find weekly higher lows a lot more prevalent on the United States MJ names comparative to what Canadian MJ names are doing right now. XLY on the daily time frame. This is a penny stock, very high risk, high reward. On a name like this, I trade with less capital because the percentage swings are so much greater. You know, if I'm trading with a certain amount of capital on CGC and we see a 3 or 4% move, if I were to trade with that same capital here on this name, I would be exposing myself to a ton more risk and reward. So you have to adjust your capital allocations for higher risk, more volatile names. But the bounce here, it's a 50% bounce in 4 days. So that's very clearly some significant movement. It's CW or CBWTF in the US. That's the US ticker. Both are penny stocks. So again, extra caution on penny stocks. But the size of this bounce, taking out all these resistances, in 4 days, we made back, you know, almost a month of bearish action. So this is another one. When we lose the hourly uptrend, we're going to look to pull back, but we have so much space to work with, we're going to anticipate a higher low. And if we can confirm the daily trend change with a higher low and then continuation to a higher high, that's a longer term trend change that we want to be keeping an eye on. And the weekly time frame here, we had 73 cents break, but we're looking for weekly trend changes on everybody. Back in 2017, we were very patiently waiting through long consolidation on CGC and the sector as a whole. And it was the weekly trend change that we acted upon to look long and to look into the first day of sales. And that was back here in August 2017. So again, you know, from the bottom, 490, and then the bull break was at 763 here. The bull break technically occurred on, we'll say, September. You could either act on an earlier signal here, but the very clear higher low and higher high on the weekly will give the benefit of the doubt of being even more patient, and we'll call it September. But the bottom line is, at that point, we had bounced over 50% from the low. And you might say, oh man, I missed the bounce. Why am I waiting for a long-term signal like that? Well, obviously not. We just ran 800% after that for the next year and a half. So don't disregard long-term weekly trend changes because they oftentimes can give us great signals. The ideal scenario for me is for the S&P 500 to see a trend change on the weekly time frame back to the bulls. That's not going to happen anytime soon. You know, a month at the earliest for that to play out, in my opinion, and that's best case scenario. But I want to see a strong market leading into USMJ hype whenever that hype is going to come around, and that hype is likely going to be sparked by fundamental, or I should say by political changes and law changes, which will then get all the media coverage, which is when we will then see the influx of money coming into this space, especially with uplistings as well. When we uplist, which KSHB is trying to do, that's when we see more liquidity and more volume and things like that. Because right now, you know, people trying to enter a $500,000 position on a lot of these USMJ names, it's very hard to do, and you're going to run the price up significantly trying to enter that position. So those are all things that we're keeping an eye on, and we'll see how the rest of this week goes. Canadian MJ bulls need to hold that support level. I want to give a shout out now to my buddy, Sean Kengla. Blows some sweet glass. This is one of his pendants, and give him some support. Agni Anada Glass LLC posts all his good stuff there. I figured some of you Canadian MJ fans would dig it. Have a good day. Have a good 2019, and we'll see you soon. Trader tip 6,487. Get some plants around your trading space. They can lively up the space. They can give some oxygen, purify the air. They'll be your friends. They don't require a whole lot of attention. I just stick them on a mat here and I slide them around with the sun as it goes through across the sky. Get some plants.